Hi. Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, senior film writer for Now Magazine, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is Michael O'Shea, writer and director of The Transfiguration, a terrific new horror movie now making its way through theaters in North America. It's a creepy, intimate character study that riffs on classic and contemporary vampire movies, everything from Romero's Martin to Alfredson's Let the Right One In, to tell the story of a troubled boy who befriends a slightly older girl in Queens, New York. Mike picked Heavenly Creatures, Peter Jackson's devastating 1994 psychodrama about Juliet Hulme and Pauline Parker, two young girls in Christchurch, New Zealand, whose intense friendship led them to commit a horrifying act. Based on actual events, it was Jackson's first proper film after the splatstick triptych of Bad Taste, Meet the Feebles, and Brain Dead / Dead Alive, and it served to declare both himself and partner Fran Walsh as far more than enthusiastic genre artists. They were both proper talents, as were their young stars Kate Winslet and Melanie Lynskey, making their debuts as Juliet and Pauline. The movie landed like a grenade on the festival circuit, winning a Silver Lion at Venice, the Metro Media Award at TIFF, and ultimately getting Jackson and Walsh their first Academy Award nomination for Best Original Screenplay. They lost to Pulp Fiction, but in fairness, anything would have. This is Someone Else's Movie.
I chose Heavenly Creatures because it was such an influential movie on me in my early 20s, and it actually has a lot of crossovers in some ways, to the movie I made, which I didn't even understand necessarily, but I did again when I rewatched it. So I was looking for a film that I could speak about for up to an hour,
right?
And that's tough. And I was considering some others. I was considering Martyrs. I was considering Sorcerer. And I have a lot of joy for Sorcerer. But Heavenly Creatures I saw at a younger point in my life. And I liked the idea of naming a film that I saw at a younger point in my life to kind of discuss that. And, I feel like also films have more impact when you see them younger.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Like by my 30s, films were having less. I mean, actually, Martyrs. But there's not a lot of movies that have that kind of impact that they have when you see them from the age of like 12 to like. I think I saw Heavenly Creatures when I was around. I'm going to date myself, but I saw it when I was around, I think, 22. Okay. But also, I was close enough to my teen years that I could actually remember how good Heavenly Creatures gets it. Heavenly Creatures I was a very disturbed teenager, and Heavenly Creatures gets being a disturbed teenager so well, and I think it's because they use the journal entries, and I think he really read those journal entries and tries to be true to those entries. In a way, like, the thing about being a teenager that you kind of forget, and maybe you try to forget, is you feel everything so intensely. Everything is the most dramatic, important thing that will ever happen in this world. And you don't have any embarrassment about how intensely you feel things.
Right. Well, you don't, when you're a kid, you don't know, right? Like, you don't know what the top is. You don't know where the levels are.
Right.
Everything is super saturated, and the colors are more bright, and the music is better, and you feel more profoundly, even if you probably shouldn't.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And Heavenly Creatures really captures that. And also, First Love is, just like the music you listen to has such a profound impact on the first person you fall in love with, the first person you have sex with. Just these things make enormous, earth-shattering impacts. Yeah. And they feel so, I remember getting over, one of my first relationships, and part of what upset me so much was this idea that I probably won't let myself feel this much again.
Right.
Like, I was so raw and open in that relationship and I could feel it. I could feel in getting over it and surviving the relationship. I could feel this idea of a kind of crust is going to come over me, and I'm not going to feel this crazily strongly again about someone.
Right.
But there's deeper levels and layers of love than adolescent love.
Right. You have no frame of reference. Like, right. when you're that young, you really, everything is happening for the first time.
Yeah. But that rawness, that's what Heavenly Creatures delivers for me, and that I, back when I was like 22 or 23, that was something that I really, really remembered from being 14, and being a crazy 14-year-old. And I just remembered back then.
Yeah, I'm doing the math, and I think I was fall of 94. I think I was 26. It's the kind of thing that you recognize and maybe with a little bit of humiliation kind of connect to, knowing that we were all capable of that level of intensity. I think that's what Jackson and Fran Walsh get so perfectly too, is the logic, the idea that this is all just perfectly normal. If you follow these impulses and these rushes to their natural conclusion, then it can only end horribly. Because they're being told constantly what is right and what is wrong for them, what situations are appropriate for them to be together in, and how then they can't be together, and how they can only really share fantasies, they can't act on them. And so with all of this opposition, then the urge to rebel just turns into something much darker, I think.
I mean, it's funny, the wealthy parents who are sort of, the bad guys. I mean, something really brave the film does is the film very much decides we're in the two kids' point of view.
Yeah.
And we're in their reality. And I mean, and the fact is, this is a movie about not sociopathic because they're too young. But these are people that are going to commit a brutal murder at the end of the movie, and we're going to see it. Right. We'll get to that later. Yeah. But I mean, they're going to commit this brutal, horrible murder, and we are not going to be distanced from them. We're going to be literally, almost at a Videodrome level, in their point of view. So much so that the adults all have, the adults all, to me, feel like Baz Luhrmann adults a little, or, Yeah. I mean, they have this kind of exaggeratedness to them a little bit. The teachers, obviously, he got the lady from Dead Alive. Right, yeah. It could be one of the teachers. And that's, I think, partially because we're so in their point of view that adults do feel like our caricature. They're the only real humans in the world. They're the only people that feel.
Yeah, it's like an articulation of the idea that no one understands them because they're alien. They're completely apart from everybody else. And there's no, they have no time for other people their age either.
Right.
I don't even remember. I mean, you're just trying to watching it and trying to think, there really aren't any other young people in this movie. They just isolate themselves so quickly from their peer group.
Yeah. There's the creepily older guy that has sex with he kind of is an adult too, actually. He's not really,
more or less.
Yeah, and he's not a kid. I mean, so yes, I picked it because that intensity of experience was something I related to, and it's absolutely embarrassing. And I get embarrassed watching the movie. I watched it again. I mean, the fantasy sequences are tough. I was wondering if anything was going to be tougher for me with age. Right. The fantasy sequences are a little tougher for me with age. I was totally in it in 1994. Today, but I love them. But I love that he does the thing with the sandcastle and the horses galloping up.
They're big. They're
broad.
Big and broad and outsized, and they're people made of clay. And
yep. He
doesn't shy away from how silly they look, and that early morphing thing that now looks terrible, but that at the time was kind of revolutionary. I get it, but it's also naive in a really interesting way. It's like if you were not a worldly person in 1954, you probably would think this was the height of culture. Right?
Yeah, and it's a little tougher for me as an audience member nowadays, but it does once again side in with this notion of being a teenager also being sort of embarrassing, and also putting you more firmly. You're so firmly, again, like Videodrome. You're so firmly you're in their minds. You're in their world. It's about identification for me too. You're identifying. The film is making you identify with them, which is a very difficult balancing act because these are murderers.
Yeah.
But it's bringing you along on this path of identifying with them. I mean, the other thing is, something that I find remarkable about Heavenly Creatures rewatching it was how much like a horror movie it is.
Yeah.
Actually, when the lodger is sneaks into her room at night, they do a Mike Myers shot. He does the Mike Myers Halloween point of view shot approaching, and I'm just there's all these little horror things he does, these little horror flourishes that is so wonderful to see in a drama. And that's something that's the thing that I think was very influential on me, this kind of crisscross of genre and feeling free to do it, and how these little horror things, these little horror signals can actually make a drama better, or how drama can make a horror better. But that kind of combination can be really potent, is something going on in that movie.
Yeah, well, you ground something in real emotion, whatever the genre, and it's going to play better.
Right.
But with this, it also really elegantly sets up the final moments while simultaneously reminding you all the time that you're in the hands of a kind of an untrustworthy dramatist, because I know what Peter Jackson is capable of. I've seen his other movies, and there were people who'd never heard of him before, and this was his art house debut.
Right.
And when it came to TIFF in '94, he was coming as the Midnight Madness hero. He'd already had 2 films, maybe even Bad Taste played here. I know I didn't see Bad Taste in the theater, but I saw Meet the Feebles and Braindead at their Midnight Madness screenings, and then 2 years after Braindead, here he is with this, and I'm all excited because it's a new Peter Jackson movie, and the title promises something, and then it started, and I thought, oh, this isn't what I expected at all, but it's still great. It's just a different kind of great. Yeah. And all of his tendencies as a filmmaker, his swooping crane shots and his excitement, his exuberance with the image, they work here in a much smaller, more precise way, because the movie itself is sort of straining to burst out of its world the same way that Pauline and Juliet are. It's a perfect marriage of filmmaker and material, and then you get all the other stuff in it that's fantastic as well, like the drama, the sympathy, the empathy, the acting. It's just, it just blew me away.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I mean, I had seen. I think going into it, I had seen Dead Alive, which was a huge fan. And I hadn't actually. I'm not sure if I was a smart enough viewer to have sought out the Feebles and Braindead yet. I think right after Heavenly Creatures, I suddenly sought out the rest.
And they weren't easy to find at the time either.
No, piracy. Like there was no way to get like, or it was like a VHS 6 times.
Yeah.
I mean, it may not have been piracy yet. It may have been like VHS tape still.
Right, like a watery old dub.
Oh yeah, like with like I think I saw Feebles on like VHS. Like it said Meet the Feebles and like the VHS tape.
Yeah.
That had been taped 4 times over. Yeah. So it's got the static, those lines on the image. And then with the Feebles, it's like it's already it's not a film that really pops.
No, God, I would imagine like watching that on a dub would be like discovering The Ring for the first time and just not really understanding what it is.
Yeah, what is this exactly? I mean, that's how I saw, I think, Superstar as well, which was another.
That's how everybody saw Superstar.
I think now it's on YouTube. Like,
as long as it's out there
in a corner somewhere before someone takes it down. I think it does live kind of. Superstar lives in those moving YouTube places.
That's kind of amazing that a film, like the fate of a movie, could be from like just moving from IP to IP, like The Flying Dutchman.
Yeah, I wonder how kids experience. I mean, Heavenly Creatures being so big for me. I mean, but then when I was a kid, the movies that I saw were incredibly important for me, like in letting me know I wasn't alone as a person. Like Martin actually, Romero was a big one. But Henry actually was a big one.
Henry's something that I got from the Transfiguration. that was floating around in there.
Very much. But these movies that I saw when I was a little kid, I saw them because of WHT, which is like this home cable thing that my parents got. I wonder how kids with the internet now, how do they? I mean, certainly not like the kids in Heavenly Creatures. I mean, who didn't have, again, who, as you point out, didn't have anything.
Oh, they're operating in almost total isolation. Like, it takes 5 years for the third man to get to New Zealand. I think, or 4. But it's one of those things where you're just thinking, oh, that's not a repertory cinema. That's the first time that movie has played there.
Right.
It's this weird isolation, and it's not even a metaphor. They are fully isolated from the world. They have a couple of movie star magazines. It's 1954, so rock hasn't happened yet. There's like they're
listening to Mario Lanza.
Yeah, 2 years later they probably would have been okay. Like they would have found something to occupy themselves. But there's nowhere for them to go, and there's nowhere for them to put this energy that they have and this attraction between them, which Parker and Hume both insisted was never a thing. They supposedly that's the major deviation from the real story. They used the journals; those are actual journal quotes that we see and hear. They stuck to the locations. the place where I was telling you before, I dug up my interview with Peter Jackson from the festival from '94, and there's stuff in there that I'd completely forgotten. Like they shot the murder 100 yards from where it actually happened, because when they went to shoot it in the actual space, it didn't feel right. That wasn't quite either grim or bright enough. They couldn't get the right balance, so they just picked up and moved 100 yards down the road, and
that's fair,
on the path, and that's where they shot it. But everything else, like the place where Juliet's mother has her last, where Pauline's mother has her last meal, was knocked down a couple of days after they shot that scene, but that was the real location.
Wow.
Yeah, everything was there.
At that moment.
50 years later, or 40 years later. No, 40 years later. I'm old. Everything was there 40 years later, and they just, as much of it as was possible, they shot where they could. They shot where it all was. And the one thing that they changed was that the relationship between the two of them is more explicitly romantic, erotic.
Right.
Human Parker said that...
So they basically say they never slept together.
Yeah. In court, apparently, Juliet said, how could we were girls? Just so either the mechanics of sex were completely unknown to her, as she was describing it, or it really was repressed to that level where she just couldn't conceive of it.
That's really interesting. I mean, it's an interesting moment in the film when they sleep together, because I didn't think about this 22 years ago when I saw it, but I just rewatched it for this podcast.
Yeah.
And so I watched it with notes out, and with my iPad out taking notes. And I did notice when they sleep together, that is sort of treated like a cliff that they... Literally, the next scene, they're in the bathtub, and now the lights are dark, and now they're plotting murder.
Yeah, the tone of the film changes completely.
So, which is a kind of interesting, strange thing, that once they have sex with each other, suddenly... Though, you could view it as, it was a cliff for them, so thereby... I don't know, it's getting into weird territory, that the second they sleep together, they begin plotting the murder.
Yeah, it's definitely a threshold that's been crossed.
Right,
like,
exactly.
It's like an acceptance of... Oh, what is it? There's this thing. It's not in this movie, but it runs through every other horror movie. Like the defiance of natural law and the aberration.
Right, and that's it. We've shown the society so looks down on this that if we're breaking this taboo, right?
Yeah,
might as well. Now we're breaking taboos. Exactly. Yeah. So, and that is something that I love about films that capture this in terms of teen films, which is, to me, when I was a teenager, you don't get morality yet. Laws are something adults do.
Yeah. And
morality is actually you're figuring out morality. Like, by the time I was by my mid-20s, I had sort of assimilated into the morality of the rest of the world. From 12 to 24, I was trying, and, college is all about this. You go to protests. You're figuring, because that's your morality trying to work in with the reality of what's out there.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you get angry because your morality doesn't feel like it makes sense with the morality that's out there in the adult world.
Yeah, and you see right so clearly.
Yeah.
And it takes a while for you to separate right and want. It's very
insightful. Yes, that's good.
Well, it's really easy when you're 21 to determine what everybody should be doing. Like, I remember that.
Exactly.
I kind of still have that.
And I still feel like it's starting at around 12 or 13 or 14 is the beginning of us formulating our kind of moral universe.
Right.
And so in a way, yeah, I mean, so I'm very empathetic. I really like these movies where kids are murderers, because there is something that feels like outlaw-ish to being a teenager. I'm a big fan of Larry Clark's movies. Like, there is something where you haven't, you'll eventually fit into society, but right now we're figuring this out on our own terms. Right. And I can see how that can go awry.
Yeah,
that can go wrong.
If the thing you want is beyond one obstacle, then it just makes sense to remove that obstacle. And again, they have absolutely no, plan is an insult. They don't know what they want, except that they want to be together.
And they're so childish. And actually removing the mother does nothing to help them.
Right.
Which,
It guarantees that they never see each other again. I mean, that's like, they just can't see past the next move.
Right.
And even the next move is really vague and undefined. And the momentum of the film as it carries us to it with them, to this awful thing that we've sort of teased at the very beginning. We've sampled it a little bit. He's dangled it out there. And there's an edge. Like it's just there's an edge throughout the entire film, and it just gets sharper and sharper and sharper until it's a point, and then you just, oh God, when it happens. But they're not thinking about that. They never think about the next step. It's about what if. Like it's the imagining of happiness, and then in the end, they can't distinguish fantasy from reality.
Yeah.
So somebody has to go. It's awful.
Well, and they're the heroes in the narrative where, this constant murder happening in their pretend narrative. I mean, but the parents, in the whole thing of how could this have been averted? Why did these kids murder versus other kids? And the film does make Juliet's parents sort of the villains. And there's this moment where the father, who's said a lot of stupid things and come up with a lot of stupid ideas through the film, comes over and says the fateful, because this is something brought from horror movies, which is this idea of you shout at a character, no, don't do that. I think every horror movie that worth its salt has at least one moment, if not more, where the audience screams at the screen, no, for Christ's sake, no, don't do that. And Heavenly Creatures has it. The father comes over to the other girl's house and he says, I think until we leave, it would be best if she moves in with us.
Yeah. Oh, that's not good.
And she's just like, no! What are you saying?
We all know where this is going.
That's a terrible idea. These two kids are obsessed with each other. Let's have them move in together. That's the solution, and then we'll separate them again.
Yeah, and you can almost see it. Like it's almost well-meaning. I mean, it is well-meaning, and it's almost well-intentioned because, of course, look how happy they are. And I guess if you're a parent in the 50s, there's not a lot for you to do with the children, so they'll amuse each other. Why not? It's almost sensible, and so it's that great horror movie trick where let's bring the mirror home. I'm sure the legends aren't true.
Let's read from the Book of the Dead.
Yeah, well, that one always rings weird to me. It's like, just maybe don't.
But Jeepers Creepers has so many of those.
Oh, that's
where it's like, let's go follow them. Let's go down into the well. Like they're just really torturing you.
That weird choice you're making. Let's make 2 more of them.
Exactly. Let's double down. Let's double down on the terrible choice we just made. Yeah. And then Wolf Creek has when she goes back.
Oh, Wolf Creek.
This is like one of the this big moment where she gets out and she decides to go back to rescue the friend. Right. But that makes a whole movie out of that horrible choice.
It's just Greg McLean going, look. I don't feel you've suffered enough.
Exactly.
Let's just keep going.
And I think Heavenly Creatures' murder is maybe one of the worst murders in movie history.
It's horrible. It's horrible. The only other one I'd compare it to in terms of the protracted nature of it and how awful it is and how no one is into it. Even the killers aren't getting anything out of it by the end of it. It's just awful. Bernard Rose made a movie called Chicago Joe and the Showgirl, which no one remembers.
Correct.
Have you seen it?
No, but Candyman is big on me.
Yeah,
you hadn't figured that out.
Between Paper House and Candyman.
Okay.
And nobody knows about it. It starred Kiefer Sutherland and... Oh, my brain wants to say Virginia Madsen, but I know that's not right, so I'm going to look it up.
While you look it up, was Paper House... I know it's supposed to be only one movie, but was Paper House the first movie where the ghost wants you to solve a mystery? Because, he should just get royalties for that, because that idea has been triplicated so many times. The ghost is here to help... No, the ghost is scaring you, but really wants you to solve a mystery.
I wonder...
Because if it was the first, it deserves, buckets of cash.
That... does kind of make sense in my brain. Maybe,
I don't have an earlier one than Paper House.
Yeah, maybe Don't Look Now, but that's your own mystery. Let's not the ghost help you. Sorry, Emily Lloyd, who's another person who should really have done more work than she did, from Wish You Were Here.
Oh God, that movie was amazing.
The David Leland
and that's
film.
a movie that should have more life than it does currently.
Yeah, it's rights, right? Something disappears and it's lost to the collective memory. If you can't immediately watch it, it may as well not exist.
Yeah, and Wish You Were Here was up there with this one for me. It was a good one. Yeah, well, maybe not. Well, I liked it a lot.
Great. I'm glad it had that life for you.
Yeah.
But Emily Lloyd's next movie, I think, was within 2 or 3 features. She was making this thing with Bernard Rose, and it's about a woman who is basically she dreams of being a gangster's moll, a cigarette girl, and so she meets this guy who's sort of cool, and we can tell it's more of a pose than anything, but she doesn't know it because she has no way to determine it. She's just not worldly enough, and they end up killing someone, but she doesn't die quickly. It's a head wound, and she bleeds and cries and becomes increasingly irrational and incoherent, and it's I remember it. It's been years since I've seen the film. I remember it as a 3 or 4 minute sequence. It just goes on and on and on. And it's horrible. And that would have been 90 or 91. So that was in my mind when Heavenly Creatures finally gets to its point. But Jackson just does something completely different with it, which is that we're almost invited to celebrate it in a really horrible way, because we're still in the girls' heads. Like, we're still there.
Yeah, I mean, but I'm dreading it as an audience member, like, in a way that I'm not necessarily dreading, here's a famous murder, last house on the left. In a way that just happens. Like, I'm not in Heavenly Creatures, and it is a horrible murder, but in Heavenly Creatures, I'm dreading it. Like, when they go, oh, Mom, let's take the mom out for a walk, and, and the cake, and she goes, treat yourself.
Which is delivered so beautifully with this knowing idiocy. Like, she thinks she's so clever. And it reads beautifully. I mean, Lynskey and Winslet are both just
amazing.
And their first movie, I still can't believe that.
Yeah.
And just these incredible talents. And you're on their side, even when they're doing this absolute horrible thing in the worst possible way, and just screwing it up by being too smart and confident. But
there's this horrible moment during the murder when the mom reaches out to Juliet, her hand for help, because Juliet is reaching out, and so the mom reaches her hand back, and then Juliet takes the brick. She's not going to help the mom. She takes the brick and she starts hitting, and it's just a crushing, horrible, cruel moment. And I mean, the film is a little scared of how much it's hitting you, because they start intercutting it with the fantasy sequence on the boat.
Right.
And interestingly, her not being able to get on the boat suddenly. Suddenly the fantasies change to where, instead of the cameras on the boat with her, now Melanie Lynskey is not on the boat, and they're screaming and crying. So the fantasy, it's almost the fantasy is over. Mm-hmm. Like, somehow in the murder, they somehow know. I'm actually not. We're going to ask you about what you thought of that, because what you think it means.
Yeah, I think that's some part of her that knows that what she's doing is irrevocable, and that this is actually dooming them. That the relationship, she is feeling the separation before it happens
already.
She's like emotionally intuitive enough to know that this is a bad idea, even though she's perfectly happy to go along with it. Yeah, it's that conflict of. It's the conflict that's been going on through the entire movie, of rational versus irrational hope. And this is the moment where we did it. Oh my God, what do we do? We're still doing it. It's just this. It's the roller coaster. It's the emotion. Right. I think it's just what she's going through. Her mind is, she's not disassociating from what she's doing, but she also knows exactly what she's doing for the first time.
Because what I secretly think it is.
Okay.
No, I think you're completely correct, and it's accurate. And it's a wonderful explanation for me. What I secretly think it is actually, we have the murder scene, and then we have that fantasy sequence at the end, and then we cut to black and we get the title.
Right. And
they're in the editing room, and they're like, this murder scene is just too brutal. This is just too dark. Yeah. And they're like, the audiences aren't going to be able to watch this. And they're like, let's intercut it with that last fantasy scene to kind of soften it a little. So we can cut away, we can cut away from it a little, because, showing it, just being on the path with them the whole time is just too much. I don't know if it's true or not, but in my head I was like, let's slide that fantasy scene up and intercut it, because it's too brutal. We need to cut to other stuff. We need to cut away because it's too brutal. I'm not sure it's true, of course.
I mean, it's certainly possible, and it softens it in a way that also makes it worse, right? Because every time you come back to it, it's
you're back.
It's
you're
even
jump
more,
cutting back. Yeah,
it's even more horrible.
That's true. It does work on that level, the same way. Yeah, cutting away and back. It's not. Yeah, it's nice. It's true.
Yeah.
I mean, when you said irrational and irrational, I thought of the opening sequence, which is this sort of industrial about the town.
Right. The documentary footage, just for lack of a better term.
Right. And then we kind of jolt cut to the legs bloody running in the woods, and it's a very frenetic shot. And that's kind of the rational versus the irrational. It's like the proper, the correct, and then the raw, the emotional, the adrenaline, so it's like these two. It's a contrast of these two things.
Yeah, the repressed British colony suddenly exploding into violence, which is that whole, Mary Shelley Victorian repression thing. You can only push it down so far before it explodes, and that's the thing that Jackson gets best, I think, as a horror filmmaker. He knows exactly how far he's going to go, but he doesn't telegraph it. He just turns the knob up very, very slowly for 100 minutes until you're there. And by the time, it's the frog in the boiling water, right? By the time you get there, you don't even know how you got there. This all felt so pretty. Everything was so nice, and there was opera music and the third man, and how is this happening? How did we get here? And we got here through desire, which is how everything happens in a tragedy. I wish I could remember who said it first, but like drama, the arc of drama is two characters who want something that is not the same thing. Whatever the thing is, they can't have it, or it's not the same thing, or they want each other and they can't have that. And Heavenly Creatures has all of those things. Like, it plays every one of those levels and just twists and twists and twists. And yeah, it ends the only way it can, but it's a tragedy. Of course it was going to go there. It was never not going to go there.
And it's one of the few front loadings that I don't hate because of the industrial and the like. Because currently in 2017, it has become a disease in cinema to show something exciting. You're so scared the audience is going to low interest. You can't have a slow burn.
Right.
You have to do something exciting at the opening, but then since a lot of scripts don't have anything exciting at the opening, like I put in a murder at the opening for this reason, but it's actually in the order of the film. Like many movies just front load and then go 3 weeks earlier. And it's a cliche that drives me up a wall now when movies and TV shows do this, because they're just so scared the audience doesn't have the attention span to just start in a house with a character. Like, we can't handle that. Like, we can't handle nothing happening for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So we have to do this ridiculous thing and then cut and say 4 months earlier. And, the Heavenly Creatures is sort of doing that with the running, but actually it's organic. It's actually kind of important to let you know what's coming at the end.
Yeah.
Because your feeling of dread mounts as it goes, as it happens. Which I guess is what all those other things want to do, but they're not doing it well.
Right. No, they're telling you exactly what's going to happen by showing you a scene. Heavenly Creatures gives you like a sample.
Yeah.
I think it was me back at the time. I think it was me. That must have been. I've been referring to it as a movie that induces a fugue state. It's the same state that the characters are in.
Yeah,
but
it's amazing.
To get there, you have to understand where it's going. And I don't know, maybe there's a way to do it that doesn't tip its hand. Maybe there's a way to tell that story and then suddenly an hour in realize where it's going. I mean, there are films like that.
Sure.
But I think this one, we need to know what level to anticipate. I think you're right. The dread is important to get that fever pitch going.
Yeah, I need to understand they're going to kill the mother.
Yeah.
Like, for me, and that's going to happen. For me to have that, oh, no, don't do it, for that no, don't do it, for the moment where I'm dreading walking down the path, I need to understand they're going to kill the mother. It felt organic. It didn't feel slapped on. It felt like an organic, important part of the movie, which is all that I need. Mm-hmm. So even though it's kind of a front-loaded open, it's a well done front-loaded open the way it should be.
Yeah.
So it was good. I was happy to see it 22 years later and realize that I still loved it. That was a nice happy surprise for me.
Yeah, it holds up other than a couple of production limitations, I think it does hold up really, really well. It's just shocking to see how young everybody is. I mean, it really...
Oh, was Peter Jackson the guy on the street? I meant to Google that.
I think he is in there somewhere.
I know where he is. Because now I know him because of Lord of the Rings. I didn't know him back when I saw it.
Right.
It's in the... there's a wonderful musical section to a Mario...
Lanza, yeah.
Mario Lanza song. Where they're singing, there's a light, like they're singing the song, and it actually starts with her playing it in the house, but then it goes across like 20 different like locations and scenes, because Peter Jackson's also making this sort of wonderful musical in some ways.
Yeah.
And so there's this wonderful musical number, they fall off the bike, and at one point they're leaving a movie theater, and there's a bomb, and I'm pretty sure it's Peter Jackson.
I think so. Just sort of looking at them and reacting.
Yeah, well, no, they grab him. She grabs him. That's kind of like he's dressed with like a hat and a dirty overcoat kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's sort of their first intrusion. They're forcing themselves on people in a weird way that sets up the rest of it.
True.
So it's thematic, it's appropriate, and it probably is Peter Jackson because of course he would be.
Yeah, exactly. And they, I do something else I remembered that reminded me. There's also things that remind me of childhood a lot, which is of course appropriate because they're children becoming adults in the course of the movie. Mm-hmm. And something that reminded me of childhood a lot was the story that they're writing together and how they just are boring to tears, the adults. They just, they monologue, they make all the adults listen to their stupid story about the kid, and then they have the kid, and he's so difficult. Yeah. And they're making all, and the adults just like are nodding and just like, oh my god, I don't want to be listening to this. Which is totally true from childhood. I did it as a child, and B, now that I'm around children, I hear creative children doing it, like, and I'm just like, and I'm the adult going, yeah, it's really interesting, they're totally doing it. They do it like 4 times to adults in the course of the movie.
You want to encourage their creativity, but you kind of hope that they'll learn to edit.
We're eating dinner, and they've just been talking about this for 20 minutes.
Yeah, and the solipsism of youth.
Yeah.
You know, when you think your ideas are the best and most important ones.
They think they're so brilliant, which is so true of being a teenager. You think you're so brilliant. They think they're so brilliant and interesting and exciting and entertaining. And, like, that's so true. I absolutely thought that way when I was a teenager.
Yeah, we all did.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's something he gets. Like, that's something that Jackson unambiguously gets about them. And, the other thing now that I was trying to figure out where to mention it, the other thing that I found out in that interview that we did was that he said that he and Fran Walsh, who was really the creative impetus behind this one. This was the movie she wanted to make.
Okay.
The story she wanted to tell. They scoured the record. They scoured their journals. Yeah. They were trying so hard to find a reason. And there wasn't one. There was no trauma. There was no inciting incident. There was no reason that this should have happened. It just did. And they were completely normal kids who were maybe a little hyperactive and imaginative, but they looked and they couldn't find anything. So that made it worse and better because they had to build towards it organically in the script without actually doing a tipping point moment where I think that's probably why they ended up leaning on the romantic angle, because it gives them the out.
Yeah. I mean, I think the truth is, which they may not have understood, but they ended up understanding in making the film, is it doesn't have to be a reason in that kind of sociological way.
Yeah.
It's just being a kid can be the reason, which is what's so terrifying. You know, like, you don't have to, it's why you shouldn't necessarily be trying kids as adults, like, because your brain is wet cement still. Like, you can screw up. Like, you can do stupid things. I mean, and kids do stupid things all the time. And it doesn't mean that you are necessarily a young Ted Bundy. And both of those girls weren't tried as adults, and both those girls have lived normal lives of not dumping bodies in ponds.
Yeah.
So it goes to show you that, this whole notion of... But I guess people that want kids tried as adults, it's punitive, not... Yeah. It's from a punitive point of view, not from they're monsters point of view.
It's a revenge mentality.
Yeah, it's revenge, yeah.
It's that impulse to believe that you can control the world by imposing punishment on people, which... I mean, you can control people that way, but you can't actually control circumstance.
Yeah. But yeah, there's a lack of logic to children, and in this, a film I love, Larry Clark's Bully, which I remember the New York Times despised. But it has a similar sort of kids don't make sense. Like, kids don't necessarily make sense. Like, why did they murder that guy? Because he annoyed them, and sometimes it just rolls out like that for some kids, and that's very powerful for me. That's a theme that I like a lot. I didn't really do it; I was doing something different, but with my film. But it is something that I'm a big fan of.
Yeah, well, the Transfiguration definitely has the aspects of the magical thinking that kids do.
Sure.
Like the idea that you can explain anything if you force the explanation to make sense.
Yes.
Like the thing we can't do anymore, because we know that outside of our own heads that doesn't work.
Right.
Although
we do it all the time with the internet. Confirmation bias. It's a term. I say that Milo in the Transfiguration has confirmation bias. He is a vampire. Since he knows he's at the end result, he understands he is a vampire. Period.
Right.
So all other reality vampires must be this. Since he is a vampire, thereby it's unrealistic for vampires to do this.
Right.
Because he doesn't do that.
And that is a perfect kid's point of view. All that matters is my own opinion and experience.
Right, exactly. Yeah, true.
I do love that he's so dismissive certain movies and I also love, and this is not a spoiler, I promise to anybody who's listening, he has a VHS tape of Nadja that he found one. I think that's so great. I just picture him staying up all night trying to wait for it and tape it.
People always ask me about the VHSs, like, why are they VHS? And I'm like, because vampires like old things.
Sure, yeah. I just assumed he got a collection somewhere.
That's also a lovely answer. Yeah. But, vampires like old things, also a good answer. I've discovered vampires like old things is something that an audience wants to hear. You want to hear answers within the narrative. So, Nadja. That was me, by the way. Yeah, I love Nadja. I love Michael Almerita. I worked with, it was his editor edited the movie for his last two films. And I was just like, what's he like? I love Nadja. I saw Nadja back with Heavenly Creatures.
They would have been around the same time.
Yeah.
Not the same year.
Possibly.
Maybe, back
they
were both at TIFF, definitely. That's
where
I saw it.
I'm choking my notes.
Oh, that's all right.
I have notes.
I love it when people come with notes. It shows commitment and preparation. The two best things.
Oh, were they a real royal family? Were they using real royal family names or just making up royal family?
I think that whole thing was invented.
It was all invented. I couldn't figure out if...
It was theirs, but it was...
Right, because the class, she goes, it said the royal family. It didn't have to be the Winchesters, she says. So it infers, so they're making up all the names. I think so,
yeah. I think they created their entire... the rubric of it. It feels like... I was trying to figure out when the C.S. Lewis Narnia books were written, because it feels like it would have come around the same time and germinated the same way. But maybe it's just a post-war thing, where, king and country, queen and country, everybody was rallying around images of royalty in the colonies, and that's just where it came from.
Yes, well, there's this notion of revering them, and the notion of them being disrespectful, which goes back to this notion of adults being sort of proper. The proper adults versus the emotional kids.
Right, who believe that they are... I mean, ultimately, at the end of the movie, they're acting like gods and doing whatever they want, so... They're clearly chasing that reverence for themselves, and it's that reflected glory thing going on. That's true. It's such a smart screenwriting point that Walsh and Jackson know them so well. Like, this is really, everything is about you when you're that age, and this is so about them.
I think they really, I have journals from when I was 14 that I've kept. So I've somehow been able to keep through all my years, and I'm terrified of reading them because of how embarrassed I'm going to be.
I would be sure, yeah.
But I know that they sound like her. I mean, I can tell you already they sound like her, and I am, which is why I'm not opening them. I think that what Walsh and Jackson did was they really listened to what her journal entry sounded like, and they didn't they made that the core of the movie, like that feeling, what she's saying, becomes the core of the movie. All their choices come from how are we true to this voice.
Yeah.
This voiceover that they use.
Yeah, feverish megalomania that... Yeah,
exactly.
Why can't we just be left alone? And that is, that's every teenager again. It feels... It's like an obscene exaggeration, but it's totally normal when you're in the moment. When you're in their heads. Like, the movie does this beautiful job of trapping you in that state. And there's no way out.
Yeah.
But what they did.
And then, it's a very sad movie for me 22 years later. See, this is bad because normally when I talk in a public way, I'm never negative.
Okay.
But I'm gonna treat myself. So I'm gonna treat myself here.
Interesting choice of words. Go ahead.
I'm gonna treat myself to being negative, and there's a sadness for me for Heavenly Creatures because this is the last time I'm going to enjoy a Peter Jackson film.
Okay.
This is it. It's actually my favorite film of his. I love Meet the Feebles. I love Bad Taste. I love Dead Alive. But, when he goes to the 100 million range, I'm out. So for me, and I wasn't a Tolkien fan, so him doing 27 parts of a Tolkien thing, it wasn't for me. So, and Lovely Bones just didn't hit for me for whatever reason. I wish it did.
Wow.
But, but I really wish it did because he was kind of going back to this territory in a way.
It's very similar in completely the wrong way.
Yeah. He didn't learn what was good about it.
Yeah, it just makes you feel that. Yeah, I mean, I was so disappointed by The Lovely Bones because I wanted it to work. I get the material, I know what he's trying to do, and it just goes so far sideways.
I haven't been so disappointed since Lost Boys. I know there are people that love Lost Boys, but for me, I'm like teen vampire. Yeah, I'm like teen vampires. Oh my god, teen vampires! How cool is that? Like, of course, I'm saying that. Sure, like, yeah. I'm saying that as a kid, and then I go to the movie and I get a Corey and Corey movie. I get a Corey and Corey detective movie instead of hanging out with Kiefer Sutherland and like killing people at the carnival, which is all I want. And I think when people say they love the film, they're remembering the Kiefer Sutherland stuff, and they're not remembering that 80% of that movie is the two Corys solving a mystery or whatever. Like,
yeah, it's definitely that.
So Lovely Bones, it's like those are the two big, seeing Lovely Bones and the Lost Boys. So
well, Near Dark at least gives you that teen vampire thing with a different, like, an edge to it, with where you sort of deal with the idea that it would be absolutely horrible.
And they give me the bar scene, which Lost Boys never delivers to me. If Lost Boys gave me that bar scene from Near Dark where they murder everyone in the bar, but Lost Boys has to be PG, so they can't give me that.
Yeah.
But the bar scene in Near Dark is just, that's great stuff.
Yeah. It's amazing that those things happen in the same window of time. Just that those two radically different treatments of vampire mythology, both of which are sort of non-denominational in terms of like, the iconography and how things work, that they should be within months of each other. It's so strange to me because they don't belong in the same universe. Like the Joel Schumacher, Dayglow, backlit Blood and Guts.
Saxman
Saxman
on Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk.
That poor guy. They even threw in, because this is my secret shame, is I did the Lost Boys 2 junket. I went out, or not the junket, I went out to the set for when I was writing for MSN Canada. I flew out to Vancouver to do a set report on Lost Boys The Tribe, which, isn't very good, but and nobody's fault. It's a movie that nobody needs, a sequel that shouldn't exist. But they sort of touched, the sax guy was in it, or they got an old middle-aged sax guy to be performing in a single shot in the film just to show you the continuity between the two films. And it's just like, no, guys, I get what you're doing, but you're just reminding us how old and pitiful this thing is 20 years later.
I ate at a burger place, and I got into a long conversation with the guy about Toronto and Toronto being used as a substitute for New York because of the tax credit and the long history of films that do that. And I was like, well, my favorite is Friday the 13th, Jason Takes Manhattan.
That's right.
But
that was Vancouver, though.
What?
That was Vancouver.
That was Vancouver? Oh, okay. But
they needed a coast. They needed a port.
Right. His favorite was correction. His favorite was Short Circuit 2 in terms of unneeded sequels.
Yep. That's a good one. I got another one. One of the Death Wishes, 4 or 5, was shot here. And it's supposed to be set in New York, and they used the same intersection, but each corner differently. They dressed each corner as different parts of New York. It's Bay and Queen, to make it look like, Midtown and Lower Manhattan, and then a different part of Midtown. And it's like if you know the city, it's like, oh, you're standing opposite from 5 blocks away. It's supposed to be. It's the same 10-foot radius. It's amazing.
Love that.
Yeah, I think it's called The Face of Death.
I kind of want to see all the Death Wishes again at some point. Don't do it.
No, they're terrible.
It's just, isn't one an old age home though? I want to see the old age home one.
I think that's the 6th one. Is there a 6th one? I don't even know anymore. But
I want to see the old age home one. I feel like I think that one might be the camp classic.
Are you sure that's not just a Simpsons episode?
Was Enemy Toronto because?
Enemy, the Gyllenhaal film. Yeah, that was actually set in Toronto.
No. I mean, I want to make sure I was correct so I could say. I feel Enemy was such a breath of fresh air for making Toronto. It was just after years of Toronto pretending to be other cities, Toronto gets to be Toronto, and he really cares about showing the city. Though it is this strange, like milky white, giant spider kind of industrial like thing, but he's looking at Toronto and making it a real location for once, which is really nice.
Yeah, there's a handful of recent movies that do that. The F Word does it too, or What If, I guess in the States. Daniel Radcliffe and Zoe Kazan, but it's shot here and set here, and mostly in the East End, but it's a different part of the city, and it just turns into this romantic comedy playland, which is really sweet.
I'd love to see that.
Yeah, it's really.
I like movies that use location. Like it's really nice. It's something that it's something that movies don't do enough. Mm-hmm. And the problem when you're trying to set something in Toronto, when you're setting something in Toronto that's supposed to be somewhere else, the reason I don't like it isn't anything to do with Toronto. It's that now you're not exploring your location anymore because you're trying to cheat. Everything's a cheat. So your frames suddenly become really there's no personality or character because the whole point is you're trying to take personality and character out because you want to just look like generic.
Yeah,
because you don't want to look too unique, like its own space. So it's the opposite of how you can use location in film, which is very frustrating to me because location is such a wonderful layer to a movie when a film uses location well.
Well, I mean, you're using parts of Queens that almost never get shot in. Right?
Yeah, because it's self-serving for you to say that.
But you are. It's the Rockaways, right? I mean,
it's the Rockaways.
You never see that. People go to Coney Island. And that's supposed to be... It's not that it's more glamorous. It's just that that's the thing that people think of when they think of beaches near New York.
And I ended up shooting in Coney for a scene. There's a scene towards the end of the film. They go to an amusement park together.
Oh, Really? I just thought they all looked the same.
Yeah, because
I've never been to the Rockaways.
The Rockaway doesn't have an amusement park. There was a whole thing where they borrowed the car. He borrows Lewis's car and they drive it, and then the editing room. I'm trying to get from 2.5 hours to 90 minutes, and I'm like, what if we just cut to the park? What if they don't get in a car and drive? What if we don't cover how they got there? What if we just cut to an amusement park? And what if it's only 20 seconds? Because that's how you get a movie. That's how you cut an hour out of a movie. Yeah. You make little choices like that.
Brutality.
It's horrible.
But Heavenly Creatures uses actual locations for historical value, as well as that weird detached eeriness of New Zealand, where everything, New Zealand doesn't look like anywhere else in the world. You keep seeing it. I mean, you keep being confronted with it. There's stuff in Alien Covenant that was shot in New Zealand that is so clearly, West Hobbiton or something. It's sculpted trees in these weird shapes. The hills look different, and so much of Christchurch was an attempt to just be British that didn't take. Right. So you have this weird alienation thing going on.
And then one of them actually is British, and that's considered to be this higher... I mean, the way class plays out in the movie is something I made a note to that I was very happy about. I wasn't thinking about class a lot when I was thinking about, of course, being a proper 22-year-old, I was thinking about right and wrong a lot, but I wasn't necessarily thinking too deeply about class. And watching Heavenly Creatures again, I was like, oh, class is huge in this movie.
Oh, yeah, Julia's parents assume that they are right about everything and that everything they say is law. They're just looking at the peons, the natives.
But also Pauline is looking up to Juliet so much. Juliet enjoys being looked up upon. That's the foundation of the relationship, is how much Pauline loves Juliet, looks up to Juliet, and Juliet loves being looked up to. Yeah. Is a big foundation of their dynamic. And then, of course, the dynamic between the two families as well, and having Juliet over, and they're renting the boarders because they need to make money, and and she's just embarrassed of her family with having Juliet over because they're not as fancy as Juliet's family. And of course they worship Juliet's parents, even though Juliet's parents are sort of terrible. But they worship them because they're fancy or they're English. I don't know, Well,
they are. They're exotic, if nothing else. They're the most interesting people because they are novelties.
Right. And even Juliet worships her own parents, even though they're horribly disappointing to her all the time.
Yeah. I wonder how much of that is subjective, too. Are we seeing it from their perspectives? And if so, of course, the girls are disgusted by their parents because, they don't get it. They have to act like this all the time. I'm sure things weren't that bad in the Reaper household. But they have to be for us to be on their side, for us to be on the girls' side when they justify what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, and also I think... I keep bringing up Videodromes because it's my other favorite film. But I mean, I think directorial reality is shaped by our lead character's point of view.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's not just to help with the audience. I think it's because he's taking that liberty of they're the only real characters in the world in a way. Everyone else is a kind of Baz Luhrmann exaggeration.
Yeah, or a construct, like a literal construct, which we see in the fantasy sequences. So we touched on it a little bit, but I wanted to ask the final question on the podcast, which is always the same, which is, what of Heavenly Creatures, if anything, have you borrowed or stolen or quoted or sort of sampled into your own creative DNA?
I mean, and I've already talked about it a little bit. I mean, the obsessive teenage thing. Capturing that and capturing what it's like to be obsessively of first love and first teenage love. I totally, marked into that when I was younger when I saw it, and I totally took it into my own writing. And the other huge thing that I didn't even understand necessarily when I rewatched it was taking horror, again, which is something I mentioned earlier, it's taking horror touches and taking horror flourishes and placing it into your drama. Or taking your drama and placing it into horror.
Right.
And that kind of merger, which I should have realized because I had seen Jackson's earlier work, and Jackson's working in horror to some degree. And he's taking these horror flourishes and placing them inside a drama, and that it's very effective. And there is a fair amount of murder in Heavenly Creatures. You don't realize it's in all the fantasy sequences. Like the psychiatrist gets a sword through him. Like he kills people, pretty consistently for a horror movie. Just it's in the fantasy, so you think it's like, oh, it doesn't count.
And it's in that enthusiastic Peter Jackson way that's fun. Like you're invited to enjoy that stuff.
Yeah.
So that when you're confronted with real horror at the end, it's absolutely shattering.
And that notion of merging two different sort of language of drama, and language of drama might actually, there's no language of drama, it's just maybe the idea of taking character and dialogue very seriously.
Right.
Like,
it's that tone, it's the thing that we recognize.
Yeah, I mean, but merging that with some horror tropes, with some horror language, can be very powerful and effective. And I try to do that, and I then tried to do that 22 years later. Right. So but that was definitely something that I subconsciously took from Heavenly Creatures. I mean, I know to credit other films with that are merging horror and drama, but I didn't completely understand in my memory that Heavenly Creatures had done it so well until I understood the language a little better. Well, I mean, when again, that Halloween shot, like, and also, I mean, the fact that the other characters are done with a sort of broader touch is actually a little bit. The broader touch is a kind of a horror touch to me. It's because it's the touch that he applies to his other characters in Dead Alive, for example. Like, it feels like it's not just Baz Luhrmann, these outside the adult characters. They also feel a little like they could be in Dead Alive. I mean, one of the women is actually from Dead Alive.
Yeah.
And she's giving a similar performance of, like, Professor, like, like...
That sort of stern thing that she
does. She's doing this kind of exaggerated reality kind of thing. It's that merging of genre that I think is something that I took from it.
Okay. And so as far as the Transfiguration, how do you want people to approach it? We haven't really discussed too much about it, and I'm trying not to.
Okay, good.
I think we should. I think
it's fun. I've been talking about Transfiguration for a year. When I found out that I could do a podcast where I talk about someone else's movie, it was just it was such a joyful response I had. Oh, I can't wait to talk about someone else's movie.
That's kind of the appeal, I find. Like, people, like, I'm trying to convince people to put this in the middle of a press day to just sort of break up the energy.
Yeah, exactly. It's a wonderful thing to do.
Oh, I'm glad. But so as far as the Transfiguration goes, what do you want people to know about it going in? How would you want to? What mood do you want to set, if anything?
The problem is you have to sell a movie, so you have to tell people something that excites them and wants them to see it. But I want people to know nothing. In the perfect artist world, everyone just sits down and they're in a theater with surround sound, with a gorgeous screen, and they don't know anything about it. And, like, people ask me to intro the film, and they want you to say a few words. Right. And I'm always like, well, my name's Mike. I'm really happy to be in the city. The theater's gorgeous, and I hope you enjoy the film. Thanks for coming. Because I don't want them to know anything. And Todd Solondz I saw introduce Wiener Dog, and he said, it's a comedy, it's okay to laugh. And I'm like, your film's supposed to do that. You can't show up to every screening and say it's a comedy, you're supposed to laugh. Like, you gotta let them just, it's just gonna be out there. They're gonna do what they do. Like, I don't like the idea of context with movies and with art. Like, I like the idea of it just existing on its own. But obviously, how about if you like Martin and Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer and Larry Clark movies, and Safdie Brothers movies? Yeah. Like, it's kind of like that's kind of that's like the 5 things I took threw into the soup. So if you like all those movies, but if you like only Safdie Brothers movies, you should probably also like Henry. Like, you probably shouldn't only like the Safdie Brothers movies. You might be disappointed. You might be upset then.
Can I introduce you to this other thing?
Exactly. Yeah. Maybe you should like horror and art films, and then you should be good with my movie. Hopefully you'll like my movie, but you never know. But it's about a kid who thinks he's a vampire, or he is a vampire. Right. Because I'm a big fan of cat people. Either he is a vampire, or he thinks he's a vampire.
Yeah. Well, it's equally possible.
Yes.
How about that? Both truths are possible? Both explanations are possible?
I mean, there's a journey the audience should go through in the movie about whether they think he's a vampire or not. And any audience member should probably take that journey. That I am maybe spoiling right now. But, regardless, people read so much stuff on the internet that, like, it's my imaginary world of you're in a theater and you have no context is just ridiculous. Like, but it's pretend. But no, I mean, audiences hopefully have their own journey with the fantastic, watching the Transfiguration and deciding whether or not he's a vampire while they watch it. Someone came up to me after a screening, though, and was like, can you help me? My girlfriend thinks he's a vampire, and I don't think he was. So which one of us is right? And I'm like, I don't want you to think I'm a jerk.
Yeah.
But I would prefer. I think it's so wonderful that you came to different conclusions.
Yeah.
And I would prefer to leave it like that.
Yeah, what if you're both right?
Right.
Blow their minds.
Can't you both be right?
Yeah. I mean, Heavenly Creatures is not an ambiguous film.
No, I didn't take that from Heavenly Creatures. I did not take ambiguity from Heavenly Creatures. I took that from Cat People, which I decided not to bring onto this podcast because I don't know enough about about anything. I don't know enough about Val Luton. Nice. I never saw the zombie one. So, I would have otherwise, because I do love Cat People.
That's a good one.
That's great. And for people that don't know, not the Paul Schrader one with Natasha Kinski, the 1944 one.
That one's good too, in a very different way.
Very, very different way. No, I mean, I'm a big fan of Bresson. Me and Paul Schrader both share that we both love, like, Pickpocket, and we both love Bresson's movies. Yeah. But no, I was not influenced by Cat People, the Paul Schrader one. Oh, it's great on its own. Yeah, you're right.
It has its merits.
It does.
My thanks to Michael O'Shea, whose excellent first feature, The Transfiguration, is rolling through theaters in North America right now and coming to your favorite on-demand service in August. As you could probably tell, I really enjoyed it. Check it out when you have the chance. Mike's not on Twitter, but his movie is at TransfigMovie, all one word, and you can find Heavenly Creatures on Blu-ray and DVD from Lionsgate in the US and E1 in Canada. It doesn't seem to be streaming anywhere, which makes me sad. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Norm Wilner and elsewhere on the internet at nowtoronto.com. You can also find this podcast on Twitter at Semcast, S-E-M-Cast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. If you want to leave a review on iTunes, that would be very kind of you. And if not, we'll always have Borovnia. Thanks for listening.